Sathya, it's a pleasure to have you with us. How have you been?
I've been well. How have you been, Ashu? It's good to see you as well.
Indeed. We've been trying to stay indoors. That's what we are kind of promoting, talking about as much, right? And I think this has been difficult times, right? But I think fortunately, all of us around here have been safe. And I hope the same for you.
Likewise, I think one of the biggest learnings from this whole experience has been gratitude.
Right.
Be thankful for what we have, be thankful for what we are able to do. And we've all seen close friends, family lose dear ones, or even lost some of those people, or had tough times medically. So it's definitely a time for gratitude. I've just got my second vaccine 2 days ago, and so I'm officially vaccinated.
Wonderful.
Clearly, gratitude is the word, and I think in a sense, the human race is the reason why it is here today is because of resilience. So we will find a way through it. We are finding a way through it, and we will get better. And if not even better than we were, we will find a way through it. But thank you for asking.
Beautifully put, right? I love the word gratitude. I think this is not something that I've heard in many, many conversations that I've been having, right? And I think beautifully put. And I think this is something that I want to take back from this conversation for sure. Sathya, I'm particularly excited about the discussion that we're going to have today, right? There's some very exciting work that you're doing at Eureka AI. We're going to talk more about it, right? We're going to talk more about the mobile ecosystem. We're going to talk about many, many of these things, right? Today. And that excites me, right? Because I think India as a country, while of course we had the desktop eras and we had the webtop eras and we had the laptop eras and stuff like that, right? But I think what really sort of projected us or catapulted us into a very, very dynamic ecosystem was essentially the mobile ecosystem, right? And all the intelligence around the mobile ecosystem, right? And I think that's really been very, very foundational element, right? And I think whatever we're going to experience in future, right, essentially this is going to be a key stone to that foundation, right? A key element to that foundation. So I am particularly excited about this discussion today. But before we dive into it, why don't you take us through your professional career? You've been a quick introduction, right? You've been a professional with very, very diverse experience. You've been out there for a very long time. A quick round of introduction will be helpful, and from there we start.
Thank you. And I generally tend to feel a little older when people say I've been around for a long time. I don't like to visualize myself like that. But yeah, so I started working when I was fairly young. I started working when I was 22, 23.
Right.
But basically born and brought up in Chennai. I was a Chennai boy and went to school and undergrad in Chennai. Played national level tennis.
Wonderful.
And then went over to the US to pursue my MBA. And then lived and worked there for 10 years before coming back to India about 12, 15 years ago. I've been a CFO for a very long time. And then over the last 6-7 years, I've been a CEO.
Right.
And I initially started my career in capital markets at Reuters, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of a slight left turn and got into corporate finance, and that's how the CFO roles came by.
Right.
But I think over the last 5-7 years, it's been focused primarily on leading companies with respect to change, bringing about the next level of technological innovation, helping companies achieve financial technology status in ways. And then also, the potential, like you said, that India has to offer in terms of just, bunch of things. And mobile is one of them. Is one of the reasons why I actually was very strongly of the opinion that I needed to come back to India. I had a reasonably good career in the US, but always felt the need to come back because I thought, and I still believe, we are just at the cusp of even bigger things. I personally am of the opinion that the next 10 years, till 2030 is the year of India. It's an absolute boom that's going to happen across, and we can talk about it.
Right.
But yeah, I've been, these are the roles I've held, primarily a CFO for many years, and then CEO, country head, or managing director roles for the past 6 years at this point of time.
Wonderful. Sathya, I want to start this conversation by discussing more about Eureka AI, right? Why don't you tell us a little more about it, right? I mean, give me a macro perspective, right, in terms of what we are at from a scale standpoint, right? How do you see us play out, right? in the next 3 to 5 years, right? From a consumption standpoint. And in that context, if you can tell us, the role of Eureka AI that's going to play in empowering many, many organizations, right, to comprehend, the consumer, right?
Yeah.
You can take me through that.
So I think the fundamental premise of our organization is to capitalize on the power of actionable intelligence that comes with mobile data.
Mhm.
And I think in addition to mobile data, the related analytics and the related capabilities that come along with that is significant.
Right.
The base of this is the mobile data because that's one that connects everybody, not just in India, but across the world.
Right.
And in India, even though the mobile penetration is, I think, about 99% right now, so almost everybody has a mobile phone.
Sure.
But the usage of the mobile in terms of actionable intelligence, as we call it, or to create ecosystems, to create marketplaces, to create lending, to create credit, to create
Right.
scoring, and the related analytics that come with that is still highly nascent. It's still
Right.
at the start. If you compare us to other countries, the capability that the mobile data or the mobile information that is used is that much more significant. And it's not just for companies to go out and sell products, it's also for consumers. Right. To get a better understanding of where they stand, how they are viewed from a credit perspective, etc. One of the biggest merges that's happening is the merging of mobile behavior and credit behavior. And in my prior role, where I was the country head of Experian Credit Bureau, we recognized that this was a big point or an inflection point where all of us have a credit report, all of us have a credit score, but the capability of evaluating somebody's credit score in addition to their mobile behavior, their socioeconomic behavior, and the footprints that they leave is significant. And what that does is it creates a significantly different view of that person, not just from a credit perspective, but from an overall perspective. So let me give you a simple example.
Sure.
Somebody who's got a credit score of X may not be having the data related to their mobile payments, the utility payments, their socioeconomic payments, all of those aspects. If you add that, you know that this person is paying another 2,000 rupees a month in utility payments. He's paying another 5,000 rupees a month in mobile payments.
Right.
And then you're able to do what's called an income estimation, where you say if somebody is able to afford 1,000 rupee mobile bill, his monthly income is going to be at least 20,000 rupees. So you are able to determine where this person stands in the ecosystem. And then you use that to determine how much of a product penetration that you can do. So it's beneficial from a lender's perspective, where they can give additional loans or products or credit cards, all of that. But it also helps the consumer because the consumer then has a richer credit footprint, allows him or her to go get a particular loan or a particular product that he or she may otherwise not be able to do. So it's actually mutually beneficial. But then the inflection of these creates tremendous other opportunities. So it could be said, okay, what is Sathya spending time on? Is he able to do, is he watching sports a lot? Is he following tennis a lot? All of those. Then there is targeted capabilities that can also be done. And all of this is done with consumer consent. So it's not done without consumer knowledge, right? So there is, in many cases, explicit consumer consent. So it is done with consumer intent as well. But if you see this and you take the inflection point of the rural population, a lot of them who have used the mobile primarily recharged on prepaid, right? Just imagine the data that these folks have in terms of not just their recharge, the amount of people who are now available for financial inclusion. And that's the theme that I will continue to repeat. We have about 5 or 6% penetration in insurance. We have 5 or 6 or 12% penetration in financial products. And only as we go up in that, could we be, as a country, be more and more developed? Because if there is health insurance, somebody in the rural area then immediately has the capability to go get help in case there is a health emergency at home. So these are things that can actually destroy families. So if you see the overall impact from an ecosystem impact, the word is financial inclusion. And you're able to drive financial inclusion by lifting or making available a lot of financial products or credit in some sense to a population or a section of the large section of the population that never had it. And it's being done through the mobile. You and I probably have gone to ATMs to withdraw cash. There are people who have never seen an ATM. And I'm talking about people who've never needed to go to an ATM to withdraw cash. It's all cashless payments now. It's all digital. All of that's happening through the mobile. And through that, you can also determine, like I said, financial behavior, other behavior. So this explosion of data and credit and scoring is going to change the game for us as a country in terms of just financially improving. And look at the other statistic that I saw today. 14% of India's population invests in financial markets, whereas it's like 70 or 80% in the US. But you can see the shift happening where a lot of people are opening demat accounts, they're getting into mutual funds. And you can see what that's doing for the markets. You can see the liquidity that's coming into the markets. These are all awareness through ecosystems that these create. This is all part of the financial ecosystem. And a lot of these accounts or a lot of these activities are done on the mobile. So the mobile becomes the driving force for an ecosystem change. And, you mentioned about India doing a leapfrog, right? When I lived in the US, one of the big things before the cell phone came, trust me, there was a time before there were mobile phones. The cordless phone was a big one where you could just take a phone and then walk around the house and do all of that. And it never picked up in India because India had the desk phone. India never got the cordless phone. India just leapfrogged that technology, went straight to the mobile phone. So even with mobile, there are people like who have used mobile for just sending text messages and all of that. If you tell a new mobile user today, we used to use mobile phones just for text messages. They can't even believe it because they start with content, they start with data, they start with information, social media, all of that. So the quantum leaps that we're making will just spur this whole financial inclusion. So that's very, very exciting. So it's at that point where it's about to do the J curve. And so everyone's prepping for it. Everyone is playing for it and everyone is going after it. And that's why we believe that being in that space and creating and helping with analytics and doing everything else along with that helps us to drive our own growth, but also the overall growth in the region. And this is true for South Asia, but the driving factor with our population, we have 1.2 billion people, is going to be India.
I completely agree. And I think, Sathya, while you're saying all of this, right, I think honestly speaking, this is I'm anticipating this to be a very, very different and a very intellectually stimulating conversation, right? I've been in the credit side of things. I've been a banker. I know what you're talking about, right? And I'll tell you what, I think what you're highlighting, and it's particularly exciting, right, is the fact that, credit systems, right? When you talk about financial inclusion, when you talk about credit systems, credit is a very, very important mechanism to change, how consumers are going to go out and consume and so on and so forth, right? And the footprint that you talk about, right? But I think that's essentially been a very two-dimensional structure. It's not a structure which has evolved in many, many years, right? I think there's transparency which is coming, right? But I think what you're now talking about, which is that there's so much of consumption appetite, which helps you comprehend the consumer better, helps you, build a much deeper persona of an individual, right? Is so much more interesting, right? And that possibly is going to reduce the overall risk in the economy, which is so much more critical, right? And I think mobile is going to play a very critical role, like you sort of highlighted, right, in bringing those two ecosystems together.
No, it is the fulcrum. It's the one that is going to drive that. And, you can see these changes happening at very minute levels.
Absolutely.
My mother was at an electronics store. She wanted to go check out an air conditioner. She walked in and there was a representative from one of the finance companies. I won't name them here. And he asked my mother for her mobile number. And she gave it. And he responded in 10 seconds flat. That this was her allowed limit that she could take a loan. But how did he get that information? My mom's credit footprint is generally very lower because they've got the traditional investments. But that's what the companies are looking for. That's the footprint that they're looking for. Technically, my mom doesn't need that credit. But let's assume you're a first-time homeowner or you're a first-time, you just got your job. You want to get in, you want to build your nice house, or you want to invest in some, a good set of electronics. How difficult was it 5 years ago to go find a loan for this? Whereas here it's at your door. That's the penetration that I'm talking about, right? That's the penetration that is now reaching the consumer, and it's incredible what it's going to do for folks. It's
I think, Sathya,
it's going to open up.
When you're saying what you're saying, right? And I know I'm a big believer in the velocity of cash and capital, right? I very firmly believe in that, and I think when you're saying that, I've had so many discussions, right? Not a lot of people understand it at the level of that you possibly understand, right? And the way we are talking, right? I think there's so much of intelligence around it, right? I think we're talking about very, very different frameworks, and I think that also is going to really change how we're going to consume, right? And the entire market spectrum, right? So I think it's going to be and like you said right at the outside, right? We're going to be in a very exciting economic phase, right? Where the consumption is going to kind of blow our minds, right, in terms of the proportion, right? But Sathya, before I come to that, right, before we jump on to say discussing more about Eureka AI and many things that you're doing, right, I want to essentially discuss two aspects with you, right? One is of course 2020 for urban markets, and then of course there's Bharat, right, because we operate in many layers, right? So my first question in that line essentially will be that 2020 has been a very unreal year and something that all of us kind of experienced, right? While of course it has had the kind of damages that it's done at a personal level, at a business level, right? But what it's done is that it's brought the consumer essentially to just about 3 or 4 or 5 screens, right? There's a certain sense of homogeneity that came in, right? So in India was kind of always plagued with a problem of too much of regional complexity, right? Even in urban areas, right? That continued to dominate our consumption patterns, right? And that brought in a very difficult, a massive difficulty for say marketers to go out and really market a product, right? And then thus sort of limitation of predictability in terms of offtakes and so on and so forth, right? This is a phase which has kind of changed all of that, right? And like you had said, right, the models are going to go on to change, right? Where it's not going to be only credit, right? Not only the visible factors where you're spending or whatever you're paying and all of that, but also your preferences in terms of content, right? What are you getting influenced by, right? So I think the newer models are going to be essentially of that. But what is also done is that it's going to change our preferences very, very quickly, right? In the traditional ecosystem, typically there was a certain predictability that you had around a product, right? And a product had a life cycle of say 5, 6, 7 years, right? Here it's going to be much shorter. A lot of fads are going to fly, right? Don't you think? While of course our credit systems are going to become much stronger because of the information that or intelligence that is going to get aggregated by mobile systems, right? Plus the credit information is available. We'll understand the consumer better, but the preference is something which will continue to change, right? Do you think it is going to get even more complicated from here on?
I wouldn't use the word complicated. I would use complex.
Sure.
But it's exciting.
Right.
From complexity emerges opportunity always. Because the human mind, and this is a little philosophical, but the human mind
right.
understands best that it is simple. So companies that, declutter situations, or declutter a particular conversation tend to do well. Why do you think Apple is as powerful as it is? The simplest, they make everything look so simple.
Right.
But there is going to be a lot of complexity that's going to come with consumption. There's going to be a lot of complexity with respect to patterns, with respect to trends. But here's some things that I've noticed, right? How many of your friends or your acquaintances have left large cities in the last year to go back and work either at their homes or to move to places like Goa or something else? Because what we've all realized is eventually the work needs to get done.
Right.
Eventually, and it doesn't matter whether I'm working 8 hours here or somewhere else. Right. Obviously, we will all come back to a back to office situation. Right. But we've all realized that you can have a pandemic which shuts down the entire world and work still happens. We still figure out a way how to go do this, right? So what that does is it's created a new ecosystem of challenges, but it's created a larger ecosystem of opportunities. What it has done is to create patterns. It's created products, like Zoom, for example. How much was it worth 1 year before the pandemic versus today, right? Yeah. So capabilities that have emerged as a result will then become bigger and bigger. So streaming is now where most people see the future because they can reach anywhere as long as we have a reasonably good internet connection. You're able to connect to the rest of the world at any point of time. Sure. Whereas people who think twice about doing that, 3 years ago, if you had told your friend, listen, I'm going to move to Lonavala and work from there, They would be like, man, you're missing out on the corporate life. You lose your career.
It was
None of that
unreal.
matters now, right?
Yeah.
None of that matters now.
Right.
So we tend to evolve, and this is my fundamental belief that the human race, the Homo sapiens, keep evolving and they learn better and better. But there is a stage where there are products, there are solutions, there are mindsets that tend to last 20, 30, 50 years. And I think we're finding ourselves in that spot right now. I think there's a bit of searching going on, but I think we're setting up for a digital growth that has been unprecedented. I see the reports on how much has been the UPI transactions per month. It's like you cannot even fathom it. It was like 1/4 of it just a year ago. We're talking billions of dollars that people are sending, 500, 700,000, 10,000. So what that means is you have replaced the traditional banking system in so many ways. Credit has just changed its entire ecosystem. Microfinance has taken off in a big way. It's actually, it was going through initial phases of difficulty, but it's starting to find its way.
Absolutely.
Financial markets are improving. People are getting a better understanding of financial markets. People are getting a better understanding of what they want to do with life and work. I think that's taken a bigger, people are not sure I want to work 50 years and then try and live 30 years, right? I want to be able to live while I do my work. And they've understood that things can change quickly, catastrophically as well. So I think we are in that phase, and you know this already. We are potentially the youngest population in the world.
Absolutely.
So that is going to drive the shift, and I think it will drive the shift in many things, including the form of government we will have, the kind of leaders we are like, the kind of things we want out of our ecosystems. All of those. I think it's going to be a monumental shift, and it's already started, in my view. As a result of COVID. The easiest example I give is one of my friends. He runs this company called Dunzo. He's a very, very enterprising, amazing CEO. And the first 2 months of the lockdown, they were in panic mode because their volumes had dropped. He grew 300% a month for the next 6 months because people were just delivering stuff. So people have just adopted that. And another very, very interesting aspect. I have a family friend who's a priest, who come home and do these pujas and all that. Business is zero, right? You can't go anywhere. But his income has now quadrupled because people abroad in America and Australia and Europe who wanted to learn the traditional texts have all now flooded to him for all these. So he's doing Zoom calls from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m., right? So we tend to evolve. There are a lot of things that are going to come as a result, and it's very, very exciting to see. But I do believe that these changes are going to create a next level of opportunity. They're going to create a lot of complexity for sure. They're going to create a next level of opportunity for us as a country and as an ecosystem for us to grow through. And I think it's exciting. I'll be honest to say that I can predict that these are the things that are going to happen. But India surprises everybody both positively and negatively, mostly positively. we could do bigger and better things than what I can predict as well.
So Sathya, I'll come to that, right? So essentially, I'm gonna come back to this question in just a bit, right? And there's something, and when I look at Eureka AI and when I look at the solutions that you sort of have to offer, right? There's a lot of focus that you have on understanding the audience and market, right? And I will come back to this question once again, right? And when we discuss some of those solutions, right? Specifically, but before I come to that, right? I want to talk to you about Bharat, right? Sathya, you've been out of, there've been very few people, very few professionals in the fintech ecosystem, the finance ecosystem, who've been part of the new architecture that has been laid out for the economy, right? Who've been part of that change that has been brought out through UPI, through wallets, and many others. And you've really been through that, very critical phase of while that was happening, right? Now, when you look at Bharat, right, and I'm gonna put this in context of the inclusion bit that you spoke about. I'm gonna put this in context of the mobile intelligence, which is very, very important to comprehend the consumer and his or her behavior. And second is their ability to consume and pay for it, right? So these are three things that I'm going to bring together, right? Bharat is something which is being talked about a lot, right? I think that's the next frontier for most organizations, right? They understand urban consumer is very predictable now, given that everybody's kind of converged into a digital ecosystem. They're consuming from this thing, and there is a certain sensibility that can be drawn out of it, right? But when you talk of Bharat, right, mobile is still a new concept, right? A feature phone is still the highest selling phone, across the phone categories that exist, right? These are people who are still adopting to the very, very basic aspects of, you know, of, of engaging in that ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Which essentially means that there is a lower footprint which is available, right? They still are not consuming as much content as, say, an urban audiences, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is a trend which is kind of building up, but it's something which is going to take time, right? Do you think, I mean, Bharat is going to take a little more time to play out than the way it's being celebrated? And do you think there is a certain amount of homogeneity which will come into that market? Because, as soon as you start talking about those layers, there are many, many complexities, like you highlighted, right? And regional complexities, and, and many other things that sort of start to seep in, right? So do you think Bharat is going to be a slightly more tough frontier, than we think it is, right? Because there is literally nothing that exists. There's no mobile footprint. There is very little information on the consumption preferences. What do you think about that?
I think as a concept, it is game. It's an absolute game changer.
Sure.
I think it's going to make our country take phases and take leaps that has never been seen before.
Sure.
But here's the graph that I always show about India, right? It's like this, and then it
Right.
goes this way. So we don't know how long this part is going to be
Right.
before, and then it's a perpendicular line. In my view, the capability of us integrating the mobile footprint is going to be the key. And I
Right.
think there is a lot of nuances that, like you talked about, regionally,
Right.
centrally, just getting the infrastructure together.
Right.
But I see what we've done with the NPCI. I've seen what we've done with the UPI. I've seen
Right.
what we've been able to accomplish. So my confidence level is fairly high that we will go ahead and do it. My confidence level on India is generally, very high. But we have to be able to firstly have the ambition of this scale to be
Right.
able to achieve things, right? One of the challenges that the traditional Indian mindset, and I'm not trying to find fault with it, is,
Mhm.
let me do a few notches above, let me do a couple of notches above what I did. Let me do
Right.
15%. If I get that stable income, I'm fine. If I get a government job, I'm fine. None of which is wrong. We've actually come to the point where we're starting to dream big, not only as a consumer, but even as an ecosystem, as a nation, as a government, and all of that. And I think so. This is going to be, we have to first start that to be able to achieve it. Having said that, I think the nuances around, you take something like a GST, it was in the works for so long.
Right.
It homogenized the ecosystem in a lot of ways. I would say it's about 80. I would give it about 8 out of 10. But there's still a lot of work that's left to do to declutter things that are out there, right? So I think that's how it's going to be. I think it's going to be a massive shift. And then there's going to be a stage for a few years where we'll have to declutter and figure out the next step and go forward. But I honestly stay away from predicting time because in general, some of these conversations have tended to surprise me. I've said, well, GST is never going to happen. We will not have a uniform, one tax. And then all of a sudden it comes through and makes life easier. So it's the power of collective belief, I think, that's going to drive this. And I think, if anything, as a nation, we have a lot more faith in our leaders, and we have a lot more faith that we can get things done. We've done a lot of amazing things over the last 10 years or even longer. So I think that's going to be the key, to get our minds together to be able to, achieve that framework for us to kick off. Let me give you an example.
Sure.
There was a textile manufacturer which made a statement about 4 days ago or 5 last week, saying that they wanted to leave a state because they were not very happy with the government support. There were 12 states that called them in the span of a day. Can you just imagine this 10 years ago? They would literally not have an option to go anywhere. So I think what's happening is, everyone's understanding today is that even though there is a regional complexity, there are people trying to create these ecosystems of large economies. That's just as Texas did with the US. They said, we don't have a state income tax, we'll give all these breaks. And then you saw all these companies moving from California to Texas to be able to set up, creates jobs, it creates all of that. similarly, I think when there is that collective belief, and I repeat that word because that, we want to do what's best for the ecosystem.
Right.
We want to be able to build that. It will come through. And in my view, over the last, I would say, little over 10 years, the quality of leaders that are emerging at the government level are starting to grow because they have a better sense of understanding of technology. They understand the consumer. They do want the votes, but they're saying, you know what, we need to improve business to be able to drive. So they understand all of that. And it's not just at the central level. Even state governments are doing excellent jobs right today. So I think it'll all come together. It's just that, like I said, it's that few elephants coming together at that pace, and then all of a sudden you meet, and it's absolute. It's a celebration at that point. So I'm hopeful that it's sooner than later. I obviously don't have a time frame in mind, but I have no doubts that that concept of Bharat will take off. It will be a game changer. It will propel us to another level altogether. So
I think Sathya, I hear you, and I think there's a very interesting point that you've made on, for example, say GST, right? And I think this is something which honestly wasn't really part of my say, for example, thesis. When I was looking at Bharat, right? And I think that the fact that there are certain policy level push that has happened, right, has moved certain people to adopt to it, right? And which essentially means that they'll play a very, very critical role of a catalyst to evangelize this change, right? And like you said, right, I kind of agree with that, with that point in mind, that the change is going to be much faster, right? I think a lot of that possibly has to be factored, right? I think that evangelism has to be factored in, which possibly I think, including me, I think many people are kind of have been missing out on. I think we've essentially been assuming that this is an ecosystem which will have to grow on its own, right? We forgot some of these very key enablers that are there, right, which have adopted to the newer changes that have happened. And I think I completely buy that. Sathya, when I look at Eureka AI, right, I think what you stand for, and I think what you're advocating is, it's mobile data and actionable intelligence, right, that you're really advocating for. And I look at there is a huge focus that you have on the intelligence piece, right? There is work that you're doing on the market intelligence, audience intelligence, mobility intelligence, and risk intelligence, right? It'll be lovely to have if you could run me through, some of these solutions, if I may put it that way, that are there for businesses, right? And especially in the Indian context, right? Because, I think we can all agree on this particular bit that, we're a fairly complicated economy, right? And I think businesses are going to need the solution in a post-2020 environment, because, there is no precursor, or there is nothing which is as predictable as it was in a pre-COVID environment, right? Thus, it becomes very important to understand some of these solutions, right? So if you could take me through that'll be very helpful.
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the things that, having worked in India now for about 15 years, is what works elsewhere, you cannot take and put that in India. It generally doesn't work. We've got our own, it's like you can't even sample the same dish 400 kilometers out, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a different version of the same dish. It's still enjoyable, but that's the difference between local and global, right? There's this catchy phrase called glocal. You got to go local all the time.
Right.
But India is potentially, in our view, the largest opportunity that will come on in terms of mobile intelligence. And I'll spend firstly on risk intelligence, right?
Sure.
Risk intelligence is what we spoke about. In addition to somebody's credit footprint, are there enough mobile data points available for us to evaluate that person from a credit behavior? So there is this concept of segmentation where we can say, get me data on consumers that are between 25 and 40, who potentially have a score of this much, and their penetration of cards, and then you can penetration of products, and then you can target consumers of that sort. The second aspect is, which in my view is going to be a very large opportunity, is the concept of digital fraud. As the digital ecosystem grows, so does digital fraud, right? So it allows us as organizations who engage in the digital ecosystem to evaluate. So people with 5 Aadhaar cards, people with 4 PAN cards, who are trying to scam lenders, or who are trying to create insurance reports to get all of those, right? So all of these start creating that aspect of risk intelligence, right? Market intelligence, in a sense, is our understanding of trends, our understanding of capabilities, our understanding of how segregation happens, our understanding of how trends have evolved.
Right.
And when you say consumer spending on this went up by 2%, and then you leave it at that, it's one data point. But if you look at it over 7 quarters, if you just look at the personal loan penetration over the last 6 quarters, you'd be staggered, because it was this way and then it's that way.
Right.
And then the next part that gets interesting about personal loans, for example, is people were using personal loans for discretionary spending.
Right.
Now people use personal loans for sustenance. It's a huge difference. I'm taking a loan because I've lost my job or I need an assistance. Whereas 2 years ago, I was taking a personal loan to try and get a phone that I wanted. It goes from discretion to sustenance. So the quality of the loan also changes, right? And so that's what is called market intelligence.
Right.
And with our location-based data, you can actually say that South Mumbai, the penetration of personal loans is dropped by so much. You can actually say Chennai has seen an increase in home loans at this point of time. So you can also see the trend that's happening, and you can see that people are, and the one trend that's starting to pick up is the number of home loans across the country are starting to increase, because people do believe that the asset prices have dropped really low.
Right.
So those who have the capability are starting to take the loans and to be able to leverage that upside that's coming.
Right.
So that is a sample of what we do on market intelligence, because then the usage of the data can be done for multiple purposes. You can decide, okay, this is the trend that's going on. There are companies like venture capital companies or private equity companies who use this information for investment purposes. They use this for research purposes. There are large research houses that use this. So that's an opportunity. Location-based intelligence is what I talked to you about. We can actually get intimate data, and our algorithms are strong enough that we are able to GPS locate somebody within 100 meters of where they are. So there's targeted advertising, there's lead generation, there's campaigns that can be run. There's opportunities that you can create in terms of their interests. Like as simple as, if I've been searching to buy a car, the advertisements that will come through to me will target dealerships that are available based on my GPS. So that's in my mind, and eventually that becomes a product sale as well. Mm-hmm. So there's multiple opportunities that come as a result of these intelligence capabilities. But you can also, what we also do is to create this platform, which is actually one of our most exciting products, where a company can come and tap in from with the license payment, and then use all our intelligence and use that to drop it into what they call like a sandbox environment. And then you drop in, you do all your analytics, and then you come up with queries that you want. There are companies that use our own analytics, and in addition to subscribing to our platform capabilities, use our analytics and come up with analysis in terms of what they want to do, what they want to focus on. So effectively, the goal is to be a multi-level platform player which has multiple analytics. But be flexible enough to say, okay, listen, you want only market intelligence, you want financial intelligence, we are able to give you that. But if you want to tap into the ecosystem, we are able to integrate into companies' CRMs. We have that capability. So you don't need to create a whole new investment to subscribe to us. We can just directly integrate. And then we start running those algorithms, which are cutting edge, which allows us to create these very detailed scorecards and detailed capabilities that companies can use.
Very interesting. Sathya, while you're talking of all of these aspects, right? I think one thing which kind of constantly occurs in my mind is the pricing intelligence, right? And essentially, what has happened is that many analytics companies and and companies which are working on deep data and so on and so forth, right? One thing that they've stayed away from is in terms of pricing intelligence, right? Or say pricing the asset, right? Now, typically what happens is that, when you are out there in the market, right, typically you set up a price, of course you do a certain analysis, right, in terms of what your competitor is doing, what are the transaction points, so on and so forth, right? But that's not as dynamic, right? For example, and that, because there are many options that are today available, right? And there is a transparent ecosystem, which is that of, say, an Amazon or a Flipkart or many other such platforms, right? You have many such choices, right? And these are visible choices, right? And then that, And essentially what happens is that the consumer, given his or her preferences, right, and there is a little understanding on the company side, are essentially in a static pricing environment, right? Do you think this is something that, so one, are you in a zone where you provide inputs on such pieces? If not, is there something that you see in future which you think is going to be available for businesses to identify a consumer and and dynamically sort of move the pricing, right? If not much, but marginal, right? There could be an effect of that sort. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, what is there this thing that you see?
We generally don't have guidance on pricing
Okay.
intelligence because it's way too dynamic.
Sure.
uh, and it changes and fluctuates significantly. Here's
Right.
the easiest of all examples, right? Geo came in,
Right.
just blew the pricing out for everyone, anybody in mobile, right? So it just went off.
Right.
I don't think anybody's going to disrupt the market like they did.
Right.
But even if, excuse me, even if we went in and looked at from a pricing perspective,
Sure.
product portfolios are so dynamic that they tend to fluctuate significantly.
Right.
For example, I may be eligible for a personal loan of, say, 25,000 rupees without
Right.
a problem. And if somebody else is offering a personal loan for 29,000,
Mhm.
the user is not that stuck on saying, I will only go to this particular lender, right?
Right.
They want to go where they are appreciated. So they
Sure.
will move on. Secondly, the aspect of creating a margin of safety depends on the risk of that particular institution.
Right.
That institution can choose to have a higher risk for a segment and have a lower risk for another segment.
Right.
And then there are other institutions who are broadly risk averse. They won't even enter that segment.
Sure.
So while that dynamism happens, it's very difficult for a provider to go in and monetize that in a big way. So that's one. So that's part. The second is, that's also why India is so exciting, because everyone is always trying to tweak new product portfolios and create it. There's now a bank that is offering 7% interest on savings accounts.
Right.
There was a flood of people to open the accounts, but they've now, I'm told, switched back to 5.5 or 6%. Right. So, but those are things that quickly can change consumer behavior, because in general, the Indian consumer, or in general, I think consumers, as evolved over the centuries, their I would say the loyalty towards brands has started reducing. The ability to switch, the switching cost is literally it's nothing today. So the cost of getting another bank, or the cost of going and opening another bank account was, just the cost of the energy was so much more 5 years, 7 years ago. It's literally nothing right now.
Right.
So to be able to be playing in that market it's too dynamic, it's too sensitive, and it's not capable of monetization. But that's how it's going to be. I think there's going to be a range of products that will have a base, and then there'll be a range where it'll be very, very dynamic.
Right.
That's how it's going to be. So pricing intelligence in general in a market like India, and to your point and my earlier point, where it's still evolving, could not be I don't believe will be a highly monetizable aspect right now, right?
Interesting.
For a sustained period of time, if you know what I mean. Like, I can go and provide pricing intelligence, but it would technically be outdated in very short span of time.
Right.
Whereas in a much more established market, I can say, okay, this intelligence is good for you for the next year or two, because whereas I don't believe it's that stable in India, and I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm just saying, since the market is in such a fast trajectory, right? It tends to change a lot more.
No, I think that's a very interesting point that you've highlighted, and I think I kind of agree with that. I think also the fact that you highlighted, right, that it's about the safety net of the organization, right, and I think that essentially helps them determine, if they want to get into that zone or not, right, and I think I kind of understand where you're coming from on that particular point. Satya, we're in a very different zone. I think this is something that we've established through the course of the conversation. This is something which is out there across all of media. I think everybody in the leadership position, essentially trying to talk about it, and trying to comprehend it, more importantly, right, of how the India, beyond this COVID period is going to be, right. And I think everybody's excited at large. Everybody's excited about the possibility, right. But then there are certain sectors, right, which are at a higher risk, which are operating in a higher risk zone, right? And they could literally face a continuity risk, right, in case they do not transform themselves, right? What are some of those sectors that you think are you know that need to very critically change and very fast, right? Because the ecosystem has shifted, the consumer preferences have shifted, right? So which are the key sectors that you think are very, very important and should very quickly switch to intelligence, right? In pretty much across their decision making hierarchy and processes.
I don't know that I would call out multiple sectors, but
Right.
like off the top of my head, I think education is going to have to change.
Right.
There are a lot of people who don't believe in the traditional
Right.
education system anymore.
Right.
They've just realized that they can find everything on the internet,
Right.
and they've realized that they can be smarter than many folks have done. Obviously, you still need to go to med school to become a doctor, but you don't really need to go, or at least there is a larger belief that you don't really need to go to a established university to learn marketing.
Right.
You don't have to go learn finance in a certain way. You can find all of this information, and it's actually trickling down even at the kids level, our kids level, where a lot of parents are choosing to homeschool.
Right.
A lot of parents are choosing to determine what they want to teach their children. It's
Right.
I have a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old son whose question is, I'm never going to use this trigonometry. So why do I have to study it? Right?
Right.
Because he wants to be in the arts.
Right.
He said, I'm never going to learn trigonometry. I'm never going to use it. So I can't even imagine having that conversation with my parents when I was younger. Right? Firstly, I would have been said, just go study.
Right.
But that level of questioning is now coming in. So
right.
I think the quality of what educational institutions are offering and the specificity of what they have to do has to change. And I believe it's undergoing a fundamental shift.
Right.
But in my view, over the next 10, 20 years, Indian education is going to go through an absolute shift. Imagine, when you were starting out, if you're told your parents, I want to become a UI UX developer.
Right.
They would have given you that look like, okay, stop joking and tell me what you really want to do, right?
Right.
But that's a phenomenal career right now, and you don't really need to go to school for that.
Right.
You can learn it right from high school if you have the capability, and you can go online and learn it.
Right.
And it's a highly lucrative profession as well. So, there's a lot of opportunity that's being created without the need for formal education.
Right.
And I think so. Education is going to go through a fundamental shift. And I'm fortunate enough to be in some conversations where people want my opinions on how to change some of these things. So the more I understand it, the more I believe that's going to go through.
Right.
I think the concept of business, the concept of working as we see it has already undergone a shift. We don't. Many companies have now said you can work from home 3 days a week for life or something like that. You can effectively get the work done, right?
Right.
I think the tectonic shift that's happened in our ecosystem is what is work, what is life. There's been a jolt from nature in some form that made us evaluate. So I think that is the largest shift that's going to happen. I think travel is going to be significantly changed. I don't think the impact is going to be sustainable, because it is going to bounce back. One of the things I love is always traveling, meeting new people, going abroad, going to places I've never been before, even in India. And I think that's taken a bit of a hit in terms of what's happened. But I think they will evolve. They'll find better ways and do different things in terms of what to do. Hospitality has already changed. I was going to say, hospitality was taking a little bit of beating. And then I saw these pictures of people in Manali 2 days ago, and, the streets were absolutely crowded. And they're not showing any signs of a slowdown in any form. But I think more than anything else, firstly, I think it's going to be education. And I think it's going to be travel, tourism. I think the other sector, if you want to call it, is going to be anything related to the arts. I think we're going to see an explosion of that. I think we're going to see new age of influencers coming. in an advanced country, I wouldn't call it advanced, in a country like the US, you could actually, from a very young age, dream about a career in the arts or in sports. You could never do that in India. I think those two aspects have changed as well. You see lot more people performing well in sports, a lot more opportunities, I think, that have been created. So I think these are the five that I would call out: education, travel, tourism, arts, and culture. And
I think do you also think that the role of intelligence across all of these sectors is going to become far more important?
Just imagine, just look at the amount of data that is being streamed and the amount of data that's been collected in a single IPL match. It's incredible what goes on in the background. The amount of data that goes into a cultural event, the amount of information that's being collected is incredible. The hotel and the travel industry is one of the largest consumers of intelligence. You're coming, you're staying there, there's a certain profile. Why do these people come to this location, or what do they want to do? So easily you are able to then say, okay, this person likes, hilltop locations, or this person likes to trek, or this person likes the beaches. You start developing this pattern about what you want to do. You get enticed to do more and more. They are one of the largest consumers of intelligence, the hotel, travel and tourism industry. And I think education, in a sense, is going to start using intelligence in a big way. I don't think it's gotten there. But that's a more mindset shift, that people are moving away from, traditional forms of education and saying, I want to be able to learn differently and do things differently. So it will drive into that as well eventually. But the other four are already very large users of intelligence.
Very interesting. Sathya, we're towards the end of the conversation, right? Possibly my second last question. There are newer business models that are emerging, right? So we've seen that in fintech, right? We've seen that in agri-tech, right? And when I say agri-tech, I don't necessarily or essentially mean agriculture and technology, but it's now agriculture, technology, and, for example, finance, right? Which is coming together in a very beautiful way, right? And same for many other industries, right? Where 2 or 3 sectors are essentially coming together, right? What are your thoughts about that, right? I mean, and these are sectors that have been using intelligence across their independent silos, merging it together, coming up with very evolved models, right? What are your thoughts about that, right? I mean, do you think the role of these emerging models is going to become far sharper than typical traditional models, right? While typical traditional models also adopt to a more intelligent environment, right, in their decision making and operations, right? Do you think the business ecosystem is going to be dominated by these new emerging models, which are essentially championed by startups, right, who identify these gaps and who are plugging these gaps through a combination of intelligence, better technology, consumer engagement, and consumer understanding?
It's already happening. It's already happening in a big way. I've been able to talk to a few startups. I end up advising a lot of them. They've actually, one startup has actually got a large amount of funding recently. They're able to predict crop patterns using satellite data. And then say, well, this part of Gujarat is going to obviously have this level of rain, so the crop pattern is going to be better, and the output is going to be better. So, and then using that data to connect it to the marketplace for that particular farming community to be able to sell it. None of it has happened with the intervention of any establishment, right? So they've just used this. And the additional data that they also have is the data on that particular community, whether the entire family is working on the farm or it's just the parent who is working. Do they have young children? Because all of that information is now available. They've already done that. So they're connecting a farmer who is, in a sense, praying to the higher ups for rain. You're able to add satellite information to that. You're able to predict crop patterns. You're able to then say, this will be so much of output. So you can tell the local wholesaler, you can expect so much from Ashu's farm or so much from Sathya's farm. And then create the ecosystem in terms of selling, credit, all of that put together. And they've just raised a large round of funding, and they are just one example of what's happening. The same is happening around dairy. The same is happening around crop production in other ways as well. So it's absolutely exploding. And what will happen is, at some point, the collective technological capability of these startups will come together and create these marketplaces. I've had the opportunity to work with this startup called Book,
Mm-hmm.
which is a SME marketplace.
Right.
Some of that information is private, but you should see the amount of transactions that
Right.
he's able to process on SME transactions on his platform.
Right.
Just incredible. Plus, he has information of millions of SMEs,
Right.
which then have access to credit, which then have access to information, which then the lenders have the next level of intelligence going on. So these startups are absolutely changing how we operate as a country. And a lot of them will become not just unicorns, they will be even bigger in terms of impact. They'll be bigger in terms of what they can achieve, not from a dollar perspective, but just how they're going to be able to connect.
Right.
These marketplaces that have come for, wholesaling and retailers coming together for pulses.
Right.
There are like 3-4 of them right now. It's incredible what they're able to achieve. And in spite of everything else. Like we've always said, right? India grows in spite of things around it or things. Right. So all of these are just pure examples. I see them up front. I see them on my own.
Right.
And, there's going to be more and more that will come as a result. So I'm personally very, very excited by that.
So my last question in the conversation, we're essentially on time. We're towards the end of the conversation. What's the next 2 years like for Eureka AI? One. And second, what keeps you excited as a market watcher, right? Somebody who's advising many startups, who's literally been part of that entire change that the entire financial inclusion, the financial model that the change that India went through, right? What are some of the things that you think are going to excite you in the next 2 years, right? Or will you would want to watch out for?
Eureka, I think our largest excitement is the opportunity that India offers. I think penetration of the mobile and the capability of that intelligence that comes along with it is going to be incredible. We see proof that our models can work better and better on a daily basis. We see the number of clients coming to us in terms of interest and what they want to do and what they're thinking. So it's going to be a phenomenal journey. I think as lenders and as consumers want to start using intelligence more and more, I think that inflection point is only going to get better. So it's going to be a very exciting 3, 5, 7 years for us. And I'm looking to capitalize on that from a knowledge perspective and a growth perspective for us as well. It's very exciting. Personally, I think the India story excites me in many ways, right? I don't need to look far. You just get on Twitter, you see the number of opportunity that are being created, the way we're building our highways, the way we're changing our railways, the way we're doing our technology. I think what's happening is we've laid the seeds for multi-year growth for 30 years. And for those who don't believe, we're just starting off, right? It's just that start off. And when we are 80 and 75, we'll be telling our kids, we were there when this kicked off. The greatest thing that ever happened. Right. I think the boom of the 90s, nothing compared to the boom that India had in the 2020 and beyond. I think as a country, we're coming together. I think there's a lot of separative incidents that are happening. I think the population is doing that. But I think as a nation, if you ask me, we are together more than we've ever been. I think there's a collective belief that we can be a superpower, or we are a superpower. Right. There's a collective belief that we can influence world policy. There's a collective belief that we can influence world dynamics, politics, just how technology happens. Right. And I think that collective belief is starting to come from ground up now. It was at a certain level, it's starting to be ground up. The single greatest statistic is the number of people who say, I don't want to take a job, I'm going to start a company because I believe it can make a difference. That tells you that they believe in the power of the economy, because the economy then allows them to flourish. Just imagine 20 years ago, after graduating from bachelor's, to say, okay, I'm going to go start a company. What would you do? Right? Today, there are companies doing all kinds of things. There's a person who called me last week to become an advisor. He wants to start a crypto exchange. Right. He wants to lend on the crypto exchange, which was very interesting. Right. So it's incredible what's out there. And I think we are going to see the largest bull market. I'm not talking stock markets. I'm talking bull market in terms of growth. I think you're about my mindset, really. Mindset. 2020 to 2030, it's kicked off. So just join the ride, be part of it, do what you love, and then enjoy it. It's going to be incredible.
Satya, what a fantastic session this has been, right? I think from certain philosophies to the market intelligence side of it, and I think the entire India story, right? And I completely buy that. I think this is like a completely fresh new chapter, and I think the fact that we are in it, and then we're going to be a part of this entire journey and the growth in the next 10, 12 years, like you highlighted. I completely reckon with that. I think is going to be absolutely phenomenal. Satya, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Look forward to catching up soon, and many ways for such interesting discussions.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure speaking.